Since the dawn of railway preservation, the topic of building replicas of long-lost steam locomotives has become a contentious topic among enthusiast circles. The main belief behind building them is that it can be beneficial and will help preservation efforts in the long run. However, the largest concern about making them is that it would be pointless and that these projects would take away valuable funding that could be put into restoring or overhauling already existing steam engines. This latter idea, however, doesn't take into account how these projects can benefit preservation in terms of economy, infrastructure, technology, publicity, and environmental impact. The most obvious advantage that new built steam locomotives can offer is that they replicate designs that have become extinct and lost to time. Perhaps the poster child for this new steam program is the A1 Pacific 60163 Tornado in the UK. Before it was completed in 2008, the A1 type that Tornado was based on was extinct. When completed, it filled a long-lasting gap in British steam history as well as being one of the first mainline locomotives built by enthusiasts. Meanwhile, in the United States, another group plans on taking the lessons learned from Tornado and applying it to the construction of a T1 duplex. This machine is an ambitious experimental design that had been tested and heavily used by the Pennsylvania Railroad near the end of the steam era. New builds can replicate iconic locomotives that have massive historical significance but were never saved. In the 1970s, the National Park Service commissioned replicas of both the Union Pacific's 119 and the Central Pacific's Jupiter. The original locomotives were both present at the completion and opening of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, but were unfortunately lost decades later. With the replicas being made, a gap in railroading and American history is filled, and the general public can fully experience what the moment in time felt like. Another small aspect that is often forgotten in preservation circles is that new build steam locomotives can replicate locos that already exist, but are so delicate and priceless that the thought of restoring them to operation can send shivers down preservationists' spines. George Stephenson's Rocket is considered by many to be the first modern steam loco. It has been preserved, but only for display. If it were to be restored to full operation, too many of its original parts would have to be discarded. So, an operating replica was commissioned to provide tours to portray how the original ran, while the original can stay behind and not risk any damage. They can also create replicas of locomotives that still exist and run, but are indisposed. In Wales, the Corus Railway built a replica of a Kerr Stewart Tattoo locomotive, as the original that used to run there had been sold to the Tallyclyn Railway decades before and has since become ingrained as part of the Tallyclyn's identity. New build projects will also guarantee that preserved lines will have working steam locomotives in new condition for years to come. While there are exceptions, most steam locomotives that enthusiasts consider to be modern were built during or just after the Second World War, and some are beginning to show their age. With these new build locos, older locos can rest and be given any necessary repairs, while newer steam engines can handle their duties and do extra work without worrying crews about potential damage in transit. An argument against building new steam engines is that these projects can distract from what already exists. On the contrary, the existing stock can also benefit from these new build projects. Newly built steam engines can potentially reuse existing components and give them a new lease of life. At the end of steam, many railroad enthusiasts pulled many steam locomotives from scrapyards, but some were in such poor condition that they had to be stripped for parts. Many new build projects can implement existing parts that would not fit anywhere else. In 2017, the T1 Duplex Group purchased the last Pennsylvania Railroad long haul tender from the Western New York Railway Historical Society. It had been sitting loose for some time, and while the WNYRHS had plans for it, there was very little money to see those plans through. And luckily, negotiations for the tender benefited both parties involved. The T1 Trust got a tender, and the WNYRHS got a large payment for it, as well as some assistance from the T1 Trust on some of their projects. In the UK, one locomotive had major components reused by two different new build projects. Its boiler went to the 6880 Betton Grange project, while the frames will be used for the 1014 County of Glamorgan project. Not only do these projects use parts that previously had no use, but it also frees up storage space for museums and heritage railroads to do as they please. Replacement parts for steam locomotives are not easy to come across. The A1 steam locomotive trusts that built Tornado were able to modify the pattern for their middle cylinder and use it to assist in overhauling a similar locomotive called Blue Peter. Had the A1 truss not been around to assist, Blue Peter's overhaul would have had to have been set back further. Stateside, in exchange for the aforementioned tender, the T1 Trust agreed to restore another tender belonging to one of the WNYRHS's steam engines. The improvement of any technical faults or aspects that had been deemed problematic with the original designs can also be done with new build locomotives. An advantage that can come with doing these projects today is not only hindsight, but also the use of modern technology that didn't exist when these machines were first drafted. Techniques such as 3D computer aided designing and laser cutting have helped speed up the construction process as well as produce cleaner and more efficient parts. The A1 Trust have currently been constructing a new London and Northeastern P2 Mikado with improvements on the original design as well as being able to share similar components with their original Tornado. One reason the T1 Trust planned on building a T1 was because they wanted to remove the issues of wheel slip that plagued the original, as well as proving many theories about the design's speed and strength. A subject that is rarely touched upon in preservation circles when new build locomotives are discussed is the potential scientific advancements they can bring, not just within the class being rebuilt, but with steam locomotives in general. Enthusiasts should accept that we won't have coal and oil forever and that alternative fuel sources must be found if steam locomotives are to continue running. Newer build locomotives allow for more experimentation and tinkering with the design since there is less of a risk on damaging a priceless historical engine. One group, known as the Coalition for Sustainable Rail, or the CSR, has actually been constructing new steam engines, not for preservation, but for commercial use. Numerous ideas and lessons could benefit preservation circles if taken. The modern steam movement have actually made two groundbreaking advancements that could go beyond steam preservation. The first is the gas producer combustion system firebox, which was designed by Livio Dante Puerta, an Argentinian engineer and pioneer in modern steam technology, who describes the process as thus. It essentially consists in transforming the firebed into a gas producer by making it very thick. Only 30%, 20% in the case of biomass, of the combustion air passes as primary air through the grate, thus leading to an almost negligible particle entrainment. The secondary air makes up the lion's share of the air needed for combustion and creates an intense turbulence in the flame space so that the gas phase combustion can proceed to the degree of completeness required to meet pollution laws. While it appears to have that extreme simplicity characterizing great inventions, its thermodynamics are extremely complicated. After all, just an intellectual problem. However, the second could potentially change the way fuel is used. In 2011, the CSR helped partner up with the University of Minnesota in Duluth to help create a replacement for coal using a torrefied biomass, which is known as biocoal. Biocoal shares similar combustibility and BTU output to regular coal, but without the polluting emissions. It is still in the testing stages, but if successful, the biofuel could heavily benefit preserved operating steam locomotives across the world and even replace coal in other outlets such as in power plants, steel mills, etc. The project might not have gotten far had the CSR not been involved and helped to push the research. New build steam locomotives have become a huge game changer in railway preservation. They allow for new locos to take the load off of older steam engines and can potentially advance steam powered technology further than where it was before. They can replicate long lost locomotive classes and really help immerse the public further into a different time in human history. They are the testing ground for a new frontier of potential fuels which could benefit the wider world. New build projects might just change the way we look at preserving steam locomotives and even bring more people into the movement of railway preservation.